A blue plastic chair becomes a missile, spinning through fluorescent light before slamming into metal counters. The crash of falling trays drowns out screams as phones capture every second. At the center, a 17-year-old girl with sharp eyes and steady hands faces 5 attackers who made one critical mistake. They underestimated the police captain's daughter. But let me take you back to where this really began, 3 hours before chaos erupted in that cafeteria. Back when Elena Vasquez walked through those front doors, carrying nothing more dangerous than hope. September mornings in California smell like possibility. Elena watched her father's squad car disappear around the corner, leaving her alone outside Riverside Academy's brick walls. Students flowed past her in rivers of conversation and laughter, none of them aware that the quiet girl adjusting her grandfather's old military backpack would soon become the catalyst for everything that followed. The hallways pulsed with familiar rhythms. Metal lockers slammed, shoes squeaked, voices layered over each other in complex harmonies of teenage life. Elena moved through it like smoke, present but unnoticed, her analytical mind cataloguing social patterns the way her father taught her to read crime scenes during their long evening talks about his work as captain. Morning classes passed in blessed anonymity. She answered when called upon, deflected curious stares with polite smiles, maintained the perfect posture her military grandfather had instilled. By 11:30, her stomach announced lunch period, and she followed the crowd toward the cafeteria's double doors. The dining hall sprawled before her like a battlefield divided into territories. Theater students gesticulated wildly near the windows. Academic achievers clustered close to faculty supervision. Athletes commanded the center with their loud voices and broader shoulders. Elena scanned methodically, searching for neutral ground where a newcomer might eat in peace. A small table near the far wall caught her attention. 4 empty chairs, removed from the main traffic patterns, positioned where she could observe the room without turning her back to the crowd. Her father's lessons about situational awareness had become second nature. She navigated between occupied tables, ignoring whispered commentary, and settled into her chosen seat. Unpacking lunch became a ritual of normalcy. Sandwich in brown paper, apple from their backyard tree, thermos of coffee her father insisted she needed. The simple routine calmed her nerves as she took her first bite, allowing herself to believe that maybe this transition would prove easier than feared. The atmosphere shifted. Conversations dropped to murmurs as collective attention gravitated toward the cafeteria's center. Elena followed gazes to a table where 5 young men held court like princes, surveying their kingdom. The one at the head wore a Letterman jacket with Ashford embroidered across the back, captain's insignia marking him as lacrosse royalty. Derek Ashford leaned back with the casual confidence of someone who'd never heard the word no. His companions orbited him like satellites, Kyle with his linebacker build and quiet menace, Adrian in designer clothes that screamed old money, Lucas constantly updating social media, and Tyler fidgeting with nervous energy that suggested recent promotion to this exclusive circle. Elena returned her focus to lunch, content to remain unnoticed. But distance proved illusory when Derek's blue eyes locked onto her position. He said something that made his friends turn, their expressions shifting from curiosity to calculation. They approached with theatrical precision. Derek rose first, his entourage falling into formation. They crossed the cafeteria like an advancing army, conversations dying in their wake as other students sensed brewing confrontation. Elena continued eating, but peripheral vision tracked their progress while her mind calculated distances to exits. "Excuse me." Derek's voice carried cultured tones of private education and inherited wealth. "I think there's been some confusion here." Elena looked up, meeting his gaze with steady calm. "About what?" His smile never wavered. "About where you're sitting. This table's been reserved for quite some time." The lie slid out smooth as silk. Elena glanced at the empty table, noting the absence of any personal items or reservation markers. "I don't see any signs." "Not everything important gets written down," Kyle rumbled from behind Derek, his thick neck straining against his collar. "Some things are just understood." Elena set down her sandwich with deliberate care. Her father's voice echoed through memory. "Stay calm, assess the situation, look for peaceful resolution first. I apologize for any misunderstanding. There are plenty of other tables available." She began gathering her lunch, but Derek raised a hand. "No need to rush. We're not unreasonable people." His tone shifted, becoming almost friendly. "You're new here, right?" "Captain Vasquez's daughter." The question hung like a trap waiting to spring. Elena nodded carefully, unsure where this knowledge might lead. "Must be interesting having a father in law enforcement," Derek continued, settling into the chair across from her without invitation. His friends boxed her in from all sides. "I imagine you hear all sorts of stories at dinner. My father doesn't discuss his cases at home." The response came automatically, a boundary learned early in childhood. "Of course not. Professional ethics and all that." Derek's smile widened. "Still, small towns don't have many secrets. Information finds its way around." Adrian leaned forward, expensive watch catching the light. "Speaking of information, you must know all about college applications, right? Sheriff's daughter probably has everything mapped out." The conversation veered unexpectedly, but Elena sensed undercurrents she didn't yet understand. "I'm focused on my senior year right now." "Smart approach," Lucas chimed in, finally looking up from his phone. "Lots of pressure these days. SAT scores, grade point averages, recommendation letters. Competition gets intense." "Some people will do anything to get an edge," Tyler added, his voice carrying a nervous tremor suggesting personal experience with such desperation. A gust from the air conditioning scattered papers across their section of table. Most were typical student documents, but one caught Elena's attention as it fluttered near her elbow. Official letterhead from Stanford University with a bright red confidential stamp. The document landed face up long enough for her to glimpse fragments. SAT score verification, academic integrity investigation, and most tellingly, Derek Ashford, typed in bold letters across the header. Before she could process more, Derek's hand slammed down on the paper with enough force to rattle their trays. "Windy in here today." His casual tone contradicted the tension now radiating from his posture. His eyes locked with Elena's, and crystalline clarity dawned. She'd seen something never meant for her eyes. The dynamic shifted like tectonic plates grinding. Derek's friends exchanged glances, previous casualness replaced by alert wariness. Elena kept her expression neutral, but her mind raced through implications. An academic integrity investigation involving SAT scores meant cheating at the highest levels, the kind of scandal that could destroy college prospects and family reputations equally. "You know what's interesting about small towns?" Derek asked, gathering scattered papers with deliberate precision. "Everyone knows everyone else's business. Makes it hard to keep secrets." He paused, studying her face. "But it also means people learn to be discreet, to mind their own affairs and let others handle theirs." The warning was subtle but unmistakable. Elena recognized the verbal chess game beginning. Her father taught her to read between lines, to identify when someone's words carried threats wrapped in pleasantries. "I should get to my next class," she said, reaching for her backpack. "What class would that be?" Adrian asked, consulting his phone. "It's only 12:15. Lunch runs until 1. The precision of his knowledge about her schedule sent chills down her spine. They'd researched her, prepared for this encounter. What began as chance meeting revealed itself as calculated ambush. "A P history with Mr. Davidson," Elena replied. Room 247, Kyle provided before she could continue. He's usually flexible about students arriving early. Mr. Davidson has faculty meetings today, Lucas added helpfully. Saw it on the department board this morning. Class might be delayed. Elena realized with growing unease that her escape route had been systematically blocked. These young men hadn't just researched her schedule, they'd tracked faculty movements to ensure she remained trapped in this conversation. The level of preparation suggested planning rather than spontaneity. Since you have time, Derek continued smoothly, why don't we discuss what makes a successful transition? There are unspoken rules, social dynamics that newcomers sometimes misunderstand. His tone remained conversational, even helpful, but the underlying message resonated clearly: conform or face consequences. Elena's training kicked in as she evaluated options. 5 against 1, surrounded. With witnesses throughout the cafeteria who seemed content to mind their own business rather than intervene in what appeared to be friendly conversation. For instance, Tyler chimed in, nervous energy manifesting as rapid hand gestures. Sometimes people see things that seem important but are actually just administrative details, paperwork that doesn't really concern them. College applications, grade reports, that sort of thing, Adrian clarified. Easy to misinterpret when you don't have full context. The circle tightened both physically and verbally. Eleanor recognized coordinated nature of their approach, the way each contributed pieces to the larger puzzle of intimidation. They wanted her silence about whatever she'd glimpsed in that Stanford document, and they were willing to employ considerable social pressure to secure it. I understand, she said carefully, testing waters of potential compromise. Everyone has private matters they prefer to keep confidential. Exactly. Derek leaned back slightly, posture relaxing by degrees. Privacy is so important, especially for families in public service. Your father's position as captain, my father's work as a judge. We both understand how quickly rumors can damage reputations. The mention of his father's judicial position added another layer to power dynamics at play. Elena realized she faced not just high school social pressure, but potentially institutional obstacles as well. Years of her father's evening lessons scrolled through her mind. She could agree to their terms, promise discretion, likely walk away unscathed. The pragmatic choice would prioritize her own safety and avoid conflict with powerful adversaries on her first day. But that glimpse of the Stanford document nagged at her conscience. If Derek Ashford cheated on SAT scores, he gained unfair advantage over honest students competing for the same opportunities. The injustice conflicted with everything her father taught her about integrity and doing what's right regardless of personal cost. I appreciate the advice, she said slowly, buying time. Starting over does require careful navigation. Smart girl, Derek nodded approvingly. I knew we could reach an understanding. Premature celebration in his voice suggested he believed victory was assured. Elena recognized the crucial moment of decision approaching. She could capitulate and purchase peace through compliance, or take a stand that would likely trigger the very conflict she hoped to avoid. Her fingers brushed her grandfather's military insignia still attached to her backpack. The small metal token represented a legacy of service and courage spanning generations. Suddenly, the choice became clear. The thing is, Elena said, voice gaining strength with each word, my family doesn't really do quiet compliance when we witness wrongdoing. Temperature at the table dropped several degrees. Derek's smile faltered, replaced by something colder and far more dangerous. His friends shifted in chairs, casual facade evaporating as they prepared for different confrontation. That's disappointing, Derek said softly. I was hoping we could handle this like civilized people. We still can, Elena replied. You could tell me the truth about what I saw, and we could discuss the right way to address it. Laughter erupted from the 5 young men, harsh and mocking. The sound drew attention from nearby tables, but other students quickly averted gazes rather than risk involvement. "You really don't understand how things work here." Adrian shook his head in apparent amazement. "This isn't some after-school special where good guys always win and justice prevails." "This is the real world," Lucas added, phone now recording their conversation, "where smart people recognize when they're outmatched and adjust their expectations accordingly." The recording device made Elena's blood run cold. Whatever happened next would be documented, potentially edited, possibly used as evidence against her if the situation escalated. She recognized the trap being set. They wanted to provoke her into actions that could be taken out of context. "I think there's been a misunderstanding." A new voice interrupted the tense standoff. Mrs. Henderson, the cafeteria supervisor, approached with the weary expression of an educator who'd broken up countless teenage disputes. Her grey hair pulled back in practical bun, no-nonsense demeanor suggested years of experience managing adolescent drama. "Is everything all right over here?" she asked, gaze moving between Eleanor and the 5 young men. "Everything's fine, Mrs. Henderson," Derek responded immediately, charming smile reappearing like a mask sliding into place. "We were just helping the new student understand some school traditions." "That's very thoughtful, Derek," Mrs. Henderson nodded approvingly. "Integration can be challenging for transfer students." Elena realized with sinking heart that the teacher's intervention wouldn't provide hoped-for rescue. Derek's reputation and family connections afforded him credibility newcomers couldn't match. Her window of opportunity for adult assistance closed before fully opening. "Actually," Derek continued, "we were discussing how important it is for new students to understand social dynamics. Sometimes people misinterpret situations when they don't have full context." Words sounded perfectly reasonable to outside observers, but Elena heard layers of meaning beneath the surface. He was laying groundwork to discredit any accusations she might make, establishing narrative where she was simply confused rather than witnessing actual wrongdoing. "Well, that's wonderful." Mrs. Henderson beamed at the apparent display of school spirit. "Derek, your father will be so pleased to hear about your leadership." The mention of Judge Ashford's name wasn't accidental. It served as both reminder and warning. The Ashford family's influence extended throughout school administration. Elena watched Mrs. Henderson walk away, leaving her more isolated than before. "See how easy that was?" Tyler asked, nervous energy now focused on tapping patterns against the table. "Sometimes adults don't need to know every detail of student interactions." The message resonated clearly. Even when authority figures were present, they could be managed and manipulated by those who understood the system. "Now then," Derek leaned forward again, voice taking on tone of someone closing a business deal. "I believe we were discussing the importance of discretion." Elena met his gaze steadily, recognizing the final moment of choice. Everything that happened next would flow from her decision in this crucial instant. She thought of her father's badge, representing years of service to justice. She thought of her grandfather's military service, defending principles greater than personal safety. She thought of honest students who might lose opportunities to someone willing to cheat. "No," she said simply. The single word dropped into conversation like stone into still water, sending ripples of shock through the group. Derek's confident expression froze, transforming slowly into something much more dangerous. "I'm sorry?" he asked, voice carrying note of disbelief. "I said no. I won't stay quiet about what I saw. If you cheated on your SAT scores, that's not a private matter. It's fraud that affects other students' opportunities." Cafeteria noise seemed to fade into background static as confrontation reached its tipping point. Elena watched the 5 young men exchange glances, earlier casual demeanor completely abandoned. She realized with crystalline clarity that she'd just declared war on some of the most powerful students in school. "You have no idea what you just did," Kyle rumbled, massive frame blocking more of her view of potential escape routes. "Actually, I think I do," Elena replied, surprised by steadiness in her own voice. "I chose honesty over convenience." Words seemed to trigger something primal in group dynamics. The 5 young men rose from chairs in unison, body language shifting from persuasion to intimidation. Other students in immediate area began gathering belongings and moving to different tables, sensing escalation even if they couldn't hear specific words being exchanged. Elena remained seated, but muscles coiled with readiness. Her father's self-defense lessons echoed in memory. Stay calm, assess threats, look for opportunities to disengage or defend if necessary. Training she once considered paranoid preparation now seemed profoundly practical. "Last chance," Derek said, voice dropping to whisper that somehow sounded more threatening than shouting. "Walk away from this table, transfer to different school, and we never have to see each other again." "That's not going to happen," Elena responded, standing slowly to reduce their height advantage. "And making threats in front of witnesses isn't the smartest strategy." She gestured toward surrounding tables where students pretended to focus on their own conversations while clearly monitoring the drama. Phone cameras pointed in their direction with varying degrees of subtlety, promising that whatever happened next would be preserved for digital posterity. "Witnesses can be managed," Adrian said dismissively. "Evidence can be interpreted different ways, depending on who tells the story." Confidence in his voice suggested experience with such manipulation. Elena realized these young men had likely orchestrated similar scenarios before, using social status and family connections to control narratives when conflicts arose. "Besides," Lucas added, phone now openly recording, "sometimes new students have adjustment difficulties. Stress, paranoia, making accusations they can't support." He paused, scrolling through social media feeds. "Amazing how quickly rumors spread when people are primed to believe certain narratives." Threat of character assassination added another dimension to Elena's strategic calculations. Even if she successfully defended herself physically, they could destroy her reputation and social standing before she had opportunity to establish either. The chess game had evolved beyond simple intimidation into psychological warfare. Yet something deep within her refused to capitulate. Perhaps it was her father's influence, years of watching him stand up to corruption and pressure. Perhaps it was her grandfather's military legacy, understanding that some fights are worth having regardless of odds. Perhaps it was simply the stubborn streak her mother always claimed would either save her or get her in serious trouble. "Do what you need to do," she said quietly. "I'll do the same." Words hung in air like gauntlet thrown down. Derek's facade of civilized discourse finally crumbled completely, revealing entitled rage beneath polished exterior. "You stupid little," he began, then caught himself as he noticed Mrs. Henderson glancing in their direction again. Voice dropped to hiss, carrying venom of someone unused to defiance. "You think your father's badge protects you everywhere? You think there aren't ways to handle problem people without getting our hands dirty? Shift to overt threats mark point of no return." Elena recognized that peaceful resolution was no longer possible, if it ever was. These young men came prepared to use whatever level of pressure necessary to ensure her compliance. Her refusal simply forced them to reveal their true nature more quickly than intended. "Are you threatening my family?" she asked, keeping voice level despite adrenaline beginning to surge through her system. "I'm explaining reality," Derek responded. "Your father works for the county. County budget gets approved by people who value stability and discretion. Your college applications will be reviewed by admissions committees who receive recommendations from respected community members. Web of potential consequences spread before her like tactical map. Judge Ashford's influence could indeed impact her father's career, their family's financial stability, her own educational opportunities. Fighting back carried risks extending far beyond this cafeteria confrontation. But surrendering carried different risks: slow corruption of compromise, gradual erosion of principles, bitter knowledge that she helped perpetuate a system of privilege and fraud. Choice between safety and integrity presented itself with stark clarity. Elena straightened her shoulders, unconsciously mirroring her father's posture when he prepares to make difficult arrests. Then we understand each other perfectly. You're willing to destroy innocent people to protect your secrets. I'm willing to accept whatever consequences come from doing what's right. Standoff crystallized into something almost physical, tension so thick it seemed to vibrate in air between them. Around cafeteria, conversations died as students sensed approaching storm. Usual clatter of lunch trays and teenage chatter faded to near silence, replaced by collective holding of breath that precedes dramatic events. Kyle cracked knuckles with deliberate emphasis, sound carrying clearly in hushed atmosphere. Adrian adjusted his designer shirt, preparing for action. Lucas continued recording while Tyler positioned himself to block potential interference from other students or faculty. And in the center of it all, 17-year-old Elena Vasquez faced the moment when childhood ends and adult consequences begin. When theoretical lessons about courage and integrity collide with real-world power and corruption. When choice between safety and principle determines not just what happens next, but who she will become. Silence stretched like held breath before storm breaks. Explosion of movement came without warning. Kyle lunged first, massive frames surging forward with surprising speed. Thick fingers reached for Elena's shoulders, intent on pinning her against wall. But her father's training kicked in instantly. She sidestepped, grabbed his extended arm, and used momentum against him with hip throw that sent him tumbling into nearest table. Plastic chairs scattered like bowling pins as students scrambled away with shouts of alarm. Adrian moved next, approaching from her right with calculated aggression of someone who'd done this before. Designer shirt stretched across athletic shoulders as he reached for her arm, probably intending control hold. Elena recognized the technique from her father's demonstrations. She struck pressure points in his wrist, twisted free, and delivered sharp palm strike to his ribs with sufficient force to send him staggering backward. Expensive shoes slipped on spilled drink, and he crashed into another table, sending lunch trays flying in cascade of food and plastic debris. Cafeteria erupted into chaos as students realized they were witnessing actual fight rather than verbal posturing expected. Phones appeared everywhere, recording from multiple angles as teenagers scrambled for better vantage points or fled toward exits. Noise levels spiked with excited shouting, screaming, and clatter of overturned furniture. Lucas attempted to flank her from left while continuing to record, apparently believing he could document her defeat for social media posterity. Divided attention proved costly as Elena feinted toward him, then reversed direction to avoid Tyler, who tried to grab her from behind. Two boys collided with each other in tangle of limbs, Tyler's nervous energy finally getting better of his coordination. But Derek Ashford had been watching, learning from his friend's mistakes. He approached with measured confidence of someone who'd never truly been challenged, never experienced real consequences for actions. Lacrosse training showed in balanced stance and controlled movements as he circled to cut off escape routes. "Enough games," he snarled, polished facade completely abandoned. "Time to learn your place." He feinted high, then dropped low for wrestling takedown that would drive her to ground where size advantage could pin her. Elena read the movement, stepped back to maintain distance, and found herself pressed against edge of lunch table with nowhere else to retreat. Tactical situation deteriorated rapidly as 5 boys began coordinating attacks, using numerical superiority to overwhelm her defensive positioning. This was the moment her father warned her about during those long training sessions in their backyard, when peaceful resolution fails, when escape is blocked, when choice becomes submit or fight back with everything you possess. Decision crystallized with stark clarity as Kyle recovered and rejoined attack. Elena planted hands on table behind her and launched herself upward, using surface as springboard to drive both feet into Derek's chest in devastating double kick. Impact sent him flying backward into cluster of chairs, which scattered across floor in crash of metal and plastic, echoing through cafeteria like thunder. She landed in crouch on table itself, gaining high ground advantage her father always emphasized for multiple attackers. From this elevated position, she could see all 5 opponents and strike at any who came within range, while making it difficult for them to coordinate simultaneous attacks. Adrian, still winded from collision with furniture, made mistake of rushing table directly. Elena pivoted and drove heel into his shoulder, using his upward momentum to amplify impact. He spun away, crashed into serving line, and sent full cart of lunch trays to floor in symphony of clattering metal and scattered food. Tyler attempted to climb onto table from opposite side, nervous energy finally channeled into aggressive action. But nerves made for poor tactics, and telegraphed movements gave Elena plenty of time to prepare response. She grabbed one of plastic chairs still standing nearby and swung it in wide arc, catching Tyler across chest and abdomen. Force of impact lifted him off feet and sent him sailing through air to land hard against cafeteria wall. Lucas tried to be clever, grabbing edge of table and attempting to tip it over with Elena still on top. She felt surface beginning to tilt and made split-second decision that would either save her or doom her completely. Instead of fighting motion, she went with it, using table's momentum to launch herself in controlled fall that brought her down behind Lucas's position. Before he could turn around, she locked arm around his throat in blood choke that cut off circulation to brain without damaging windpipe. He struggled for perhaps 5 seconds before going limp, and she lowered him gently to floor rather than letting him crash unconscious into debris field cafeteria had become. Kyle, recovered now from earlier encounter with furniture, bellowed with rage and charged like angry bear. Size and momentum made him seem unstoppable, but Elena had learned that biggest opponents often provide most spectacular defeats. She waited until last possible moment, then stepped aside and extended leg in perfectly timed sweep that caught ankles and sent all 200+ pounds of him crashing face first into overturned table. Impact reverberated through cafeteria like earthquake as students recording nearby scrambled backward, chairs and debris flying in all directions from point of impact. Kyle lay motionless among wreckage, conscious but thoroughly stunned. Only Derek remained standing, designer clothes torn and dirty, perfect hair disheveled, blue eyes blazing with fury, bordering on madness. Around them, cafeteria looked like war zone, tables overturned, chairs scattered everywhere, food and drinks spilled across floor in abstract patterns of chaos. At least 30 students had phones out, recording every moment for immediate upload to social media. "You crazy," Derek started to say, then launched himself at her with desperate aggression of someone whose entire worldview had just shattered. Attack lacked technique, relying purely on rage and assumption that superior size would overwhelm her defenses. Elena caught his wrist as he swung, stepped inside his reach, and used textbook shoulder throw to send him sailing over her hip. He landed hard on back among scattered chairs, impact driving air from lungs in sharp gasp. Before he could recover, she dropped one knee beside his head and applied joint lock to his arm that brought tears to his eyes. "Submit," she said quietly, voice somehow carrying clearly through chaos. "I don't want to hurt you any more than I already have." Words hung in suddenly quiet air as students realized fight was essentially over. Derek Ashford, golden boy of Riverside Academy, lay defeated among debris of his own making, while New Girl held him immobilized with techniques speaking of serious training and absolute confidence. "Security! Everyone back away immediately." Commanding voice cut through aftermath like blade. Principal Coleman strode into cafeteria flanked by 2 security guards, face displaying particular brand of administrative fury reserved for incidents requiring extensive paperwork and parental phone calls. Behind him, Mrs. Henderson wrung hands while taking rapid notes on tablet, already preparing documentation for what promised to be complex investigation. Elena released joint lock and stepped away from Derek, hands raised to show she posed no further threat. Around them, 5 boys began picking themselves up from various positions among overturned furniture, groaning and checking for injuries while avoiding eye contact with adults now taking control. "Miss Vasquez, step away from other students immediately," Principal Coleman ordered, but tone lacked accusatory edge she expected. His eyes swept scene, taking in positioning of bodies, pattern of debris, smartphones recording from multiple angles. Years of experience reading teenage conflicts taught him to recognize defensive actions versus aggressive assault. "Principal Coleman!" a voice called from near windows. "I recorded the whole thing. She didn't start it. They surrounded her first." Other students began speaking up, voices overlapping as they volunteered witness testimony. Narrative emerging painted clear picture of escalation and self-defense rather than unprovoked violence. Several students shared recordings with security guards, creating digital evidence trail that would be difficult even for influential families to suppress or manipulate. Derek struggled to feet, face flushed with humiliation and rage. "She attacked us. She's crazy. She just started hitting people for no reason." But protest sounded hollow, even to his own ears, undermined by witness statements and video evidence already circulating through social media. "Mr. Ashford, you will remain silent until we sort this out," Principal Coleman commanded, with authority of someone who dealt with entitled students and their creative interpretations of reality. "Everyone involved will be coming to my office for individual interviews." As if summoned by administrative alarm system, Judge Ashford arrived still wearing judicial robes, face thunderous with particular fury of powerful man, whose son had embarrassed him publicly. Behind him followed Captain Vasquez, still in uniform, expression carefully neutral, as he surveyed scene where his daughter stood among wreckage. 2 men represented different approaches to authority and justice, contrasting demeanors immediately apparent to everyone present. Judge Ashford radiated entitled outrage of someone unused to having families' actions questioned, while Captain Vasquez displayed measured professionalism of law enforcement officer gathering facts before drawing conclusions. "What exactly happened here?" Judge Ashford demanded, voice carrying courtroom authority used to intimidate defendants and attorneys alike. But Principal Coleman had been managing powerful parents and their problem children for 15 years, and he refused to be steamrolled by judicial bluster. "We're conducting interviews to establish facts, Your Honor. Students involved will each give statements individually, and we have multiple video recordings. Mention of video evidence drained some color from Judge Ashford's face. In today's digital age, controlling narratives required controlling all cameras, and clearly that ship had sailed. His son's humiliation was now permanent record, available for viral distribution and endless replay." Captain Vasquez approached his daughter with careful steps, trained eyes taking in her defensive posture, positioning of other students, pattern of overturned furniture. "Are you injured, Elena?" "No, sir." "Are they?" She nodded toward 5 boys, genuine concern evident despite everything that transpired. Her father's lips twitched in what might be beginning of proud smile. Even in aftermath of violent confrontation, her first thought was for welfare of those who attacked her, the values he tried to instill during dinner-table conversations about justice and responsibility. "Everyone will receive medical evaluation as precaution," Principal Coleman announced. "But first, we need statements from all parties involved." Investigation that followed unfolded with methodical precision. Students were interviewed separately, stories compared and cross-referenced. Phone recordings reviewed frame by frame, establishing timeline, clearly showing escalation from verbal threats to physical assault. Stanford University document that started entire confrontation was discovered among scattered papers, red confidential stamp providing context for underlying motivations. Within hours, scandal expanded far beyond cafeteria fight. Academic fraud investigation. Derek Ashford thought he could suppress through intimidation became front-page news when local reporters obtained copies of video recordings. His SAT score manipulation, originally known only to university administrators, became public knowledge as journalists dug deeper into story. Consequences cascaded through community like dominoes falling in sequence. Derek lost lacrosse scholarship and faced criminal charges for fraud. 4 accomplices were suspended from school and expelled from respective sports teams. Judge Ashford recused himself from several cases to avoid conflicts of interest. Judicial reputation permanently stained by son's actions and own attempts to cover them up. But for Elena Vasquez, aftermath brought unexpected opportunities rather than punishment she'd braced herself to endure. Video recordings clearly established her actions as self-defense against multiple attackers, and community rallied around new girl who stood up to corruption and entitled privilege. She was invited to join school's peer mediation program, helping other students resolve conflicts before they escalated to violence. 6 months later, Elena stood in same cafeteria where her high school career nearly ended before it began. But now, she conducted weekly self-defense classes for students wanting to learn confidence and personal protection skills. Overturned tables had been replaced, scattered chairs restacked, debris of that dramatic confrontation cleared away. Yet something fundamental had changed in atmosphere of Riverside Academy. Students who once suffered in silence under bullying and intimidation had found their voices. Unspoken social hierarchies protecting privileged abusers had been challenged and reformed. Culture itself had shifted toward accountability and justice rather than power and privilege. "Miss Vasquez?" A shy freshman approached after class, clutching notebook against chest. "I wanted to thank you for everything you've done here. Before you came, people like me didn't have anyone to turn to." Elena smiled, remembering her own first-day terror and isolation. "You always had strength inside you. Sometimes you just need to learn how to access it." Girl nodded solemnly, then hurried away to join friends. Around cafeteria, students ate lunches in atmosphere of safety and mutual respect that was unimaginable just months before. Revolution that began with flying chairs had evolved into something far more powerful. Community transformation proving ordinary people can create extraordinary change when they choose courage over compliance. And somewhere in back of her mind, Elena heard her father's voice from one of their dinner table conversations. "The hardest choice is often the right choice. Never let fear of consequences stop you from doing what you know is just." She looked around at the cafeteria full of students who now understood that same lesson and knew that every bruise, every risk, every difficult moment had been worth it.